Thank you for joining us to our Wednesday night study. And again, we're in the Epistle of Jude, but I want to make one announcement. Next week, in Thanksgiving week, we will not be having Wednesday night study. I want to wish everyone a great Thanksgiving with your family and your friends, and I hope you have a blessed time. So tonight, we're going to continue to do what we normally do. I'm going to go over in the news and give you some of my insight into the prophecies that are happening through our news, and then go right into the book of Jude, which is an amazing book. I'm really enjoying it, and we're also springboarding from Jude to some other subjects that are there. So welcome again. Thank you for joining in. Let me start within the news here tonight and tell you something about under the New World Order. UN Digital ID. You've heard me talk about this several times, but it's getting closer and closer to being a global type of system that's actually being implemented in a lot of different countries. The inevitable takeover, this article says, digital identity and total control is coming. Now, most of us, when we hear digital identity, we're really kind of confused. We're really not sure what it means. So even though this article is a little wordy, I'm going to try to give you a little bit more of an understanding of it. So the European Parliament and the Council of European Union reached a final agreement this week on the establishment of what's called the European Digital Identity Wallet. Now, what does that mean? Well, again, I don't want to read all of it to you. I just want to paraphrase it for you. But it marks an important step towards a digital decade of 2030 and fits into the UN agenda of 2030. And so what it means is it's trying to number every single person in Europe and then eventually, of course, on the planet. And what they'll do is they'll give you a digital wallet. That wallet will actually be controlled or actually looked over by the government or any other agency. Everyone will have a certain identity on this digital wallet. In that digital wallet, you'll probably have an account of your CBDCs. You've heard me talk about that. Central bank digital currency, and so your money would be tallied in there. Also, all of your transactions would be tallied in there. Your health history would be tallied in there. Whether you had the vaccines would be tallied in there. So you can see where this is going. This is going to a spot of just really kind of your privacy and my privacy will be gone, because basically the governments will be able to have access to this digital wallet, and it will be able to they'll be able to bar you from going on a plane, bar you from going getting tickets, buying a house. China already has it. India has already marked everybody in their nation. They have a database for every single person that's in India. You're talking about 1.2 billion people. And China already has it, and they're already using it to restrict people. So now the European Union, and again, let me remind you, the European Union is a huge block of people. We have 350 million people in America, but the European Union has slightly more than that. So they are a block that really control a lot of things in the world. So ahead of the European Parliament's decision, over 500 privacy and cybersecurity experts from 39 countries signed a joint letter warning that the legislation fails, I'm quoting, to properly respect the right to privacy of citizens and secure online communications. And that's another thing that'll happen. You won't go online without the government or anyone who looks into it knowing that. So your access to your financial assets can be denied or stopped if you don't do what you're told, if you're not complicit with the governments, whatever government might be. So, however, expanding the use of digital IDs to cover on all online activities would be a significant step towards global ID for every single person on the planet. Let's talk Revelation. Let's talk not being able to buy or sell unless you had a mark. Let's talk knowing about everything about everyone. So no ID, no access would change the nature of identification and verification systems worldwide. The ability of governments to control what you see and what you don't see online would make Facebook censorship over community standards pale in comparison. That which is branded hate or misinformation would be blocked, and as conservatives have learned, it is often traditional biblical values that are banned as such. So not only is it going to track you in your purchases, not only will it give you a digital ID and talk about your health history, but it'll also ban you from saying certain things on the internet. It's really kind of interesting to me as we see the politics start to shape up for 2024. Nikki Haley said this week that she wants to be able to put every single person, identify every person online by their name. That may sound really good. She said if she's president, first thing she's going to do. That may sound really good, but you have an autonomous ability to be online. It's part of free speech. So we got to be really careful. It's a cut. It can go two ways. So I guess the bottom line, what I'm trying to say is that these digital wallets are not your friend. These are something that will definitely impair your privacy and actually impair your ability for free speech. Let's go a little bit further, and let me tell you a little about Israel. And let me give you this one. 290,000 attended a March for Israel in our capital this week. So one of the largest crowds ever on the mall. And I'm really excited about seeing something like this because we've been watching our secular news give us the 4,000 and the 5,000 that are marching for Hamas, which, by the way, they don't know what they're doing. I'll show that to you in a moment. But here we have a solidarity for Israel, and I'm thankful for that. The Bible talks about the nation that blesses Israel will be blessed. The nation that curses Israel will be cursed. And America still has a blessing because a lot of Americans, unlike our media, unlike the Biden administration, a lot of Americans are really behind Israel all the way, not just with talks. Biden is all talk. He's not doing anything other than talking. I mean, we've been bombed 57 times from Iranian proxies in Syria and in Iraq. And we've been bombed 57 times with injuries to our servicemen. And all we've done is managed to blow up a couple little warehouses in Iran. So we're not doing what Biden said we're going to do. He's the one that's pushing for a ceasefire. And we'll talk about that in a moment, talk about the propaganda wars that are going on. And so I'm really excited to see that. I don't like showing his face, but I will. It says Biden's early support for Israel is turning into something more ominous. So soon after the Hamas pogrom in October 7th, the United States sent 2 aircraft carriers, additional land-based warplanes, and eventually a guided missile submarine to the region. Looks like a real show of force, doesn't it? This was said to be a clear message of deterrence to Hezbollah and its patron Iran, warning them not to escalate the ensuing war between Israel and Hamas by attacking Israel from southern Lebanon. That sounds really good. It looked like a really huge show of force. And then, unfortunately, when Iran's proxy started bombing our air bases and sending drones over to bomb our air bases, again, I think it's 57 times right now, the count is, Biden came out in his administration saying, well, it wasn't related to Israel, to the war in Hamas and Israel. That's ridiculous. Of course it's related. With 150,000 precision-guided missiles embedded in Lebanon's civilian population and able to target the whole of Israel, Hezbollah poses a vastly greater threat to Israel than Hamas. Now, I hope I'm wrong, but I'm going to tell you this. Right now, Hezbollah is holding back. They're throwing some salvos across the Israeli border, the northern border, and there's about 20 villages and cities in northern Israel, the Golan, that have been evacuated. They're only sending a couple over, a couple dozen here, a couple dozen there. And I don't want to minimize that. It still could take someone's life. It hasn't so far. I really think what Hezbollah to the north is waiting for is for Hamas to be totally eliminated. Once they are, you might see Hezbollah kick in, and you might see that attack coming. So far, we're playing cat and mouse. America's not doing anything. We're afraid, and that's really bad because strength is our best deterrent. Trump knew that. Biden does not know that. He is appeasing everyone, trying to appease them. You cannot appease a terrorist nation. It doesn't happen. In their contract, in their covenants, Hamas, and I've shared this to you, Hamas's covenants, their constitution, if you will, says that their sole purpose is to eliminate Israel. You've heard them saying it in the protests from the river to the sea. That means from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. That's Israel. There is nothing between the Jordan River and the sea. They want all of that back, but they don't really want that first. They want to kill every single Jew. And again, our southern border, we could talk about that. We have so many people that have come in, so many millions, and so many getaways that have come through. We don't even know who they are. So there may be cells in America. And again, remember, Iran thinks of us as the great Satan, and Israel is the little Satan. So whatever happens to Israel, listen, Iran is not going to lay down. They are going to go, and they're very close to nuclear weapons. And so you can see the scenario. It's not a real good scenario. Iran was also waging war against America itself. During the past month, Iranian proxies in the region have mounted rocket attacks, as I said, against U.S. air bases in Iraq and Syria at least 57 times. Dozens of American personnel have been injured, and one American contractor died of cardiac arrest. If you had another president in the White House, what you would see is us bombing Iran. They would take out Tehran. They would take out maybe some of the oil fields. Maybe they would take out the Ayatollah. That's the one that they would protect the most. All we need to do is threaten to do that. All we need to do is say the Ayatollah is gone. We're gonna mark him like we marked some of the other Hamas leaders or some of the other ISIS leaders. If we did that, maybe Iran would back up. But we're doing nothing. We're hitting warehouses that have munitions in it. That's nothing. And Iran's laughing at us. And so sooner or later, we're going to have to show some strength. If we don't, it's going to be worse and worse. I pray that there's not an American military man killed by one of these strikes. Because if that's the case, then you're going to see the outcry come that we have to do something. America's passivity is going hand in hand with a notable cooling of its original support for Israel. Immediately after the Hamas atrocities, U.S. President Joe Biden visited Jerusalem. He pledged that the U.S. would stand shoulder to shoulder with Israel in the total destruction of Hamas and undertook weapons supply programs costing millions of dollars. But now he is cooled. Now he's talking about a ceasefire. As a matter of fact, Israel right now will have several hours, 4 hours a day, where they'll cease their hostilities. And Israel has a corridor for Palestinians to get out of Palestine. Let me remind you, the Gazans are being held captive. It's a war crime. We know that right now, today, the IDF went under a hospital, one of the major hospitals in Gaza, which is the command center for Hamas, and has hundreds of miles of tunnels underneath the hospital. And let me remind you, there's civilians in that hospital. There's children, there's babies, there's elderly, they're in the hospital. It's a war crime to put civilians in harm's way, and that's exactly what Hamas has done. So when you hear about Israel killing Gazans, that is the Palestinians, Hamas killing their own people. They're putting them in harm's way. Why? Because they want to win the propaganda war. They want to tell you how atrocious Israel is in killing civilians. Israel is taking every precaution it can not to kill civilians. I just heard from someone that I know that they went into the hospital and they took precise, specific aim not to kill civilians. These are highly trained men that they put in there. Will civilians die? Of course they will, because Hamas is putting them in harm's way. So don't believe the propaganda, especially coming out of the Western media, because all we're doing in the Western media is quoting Hamas's health department, which is owned and operated by Hamas. We'll get to that in a moment. So last week, U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken told a Senate hearing that after Israel succeeded in ousting Hamas, quote, what would make the most sense would be for an effective and revitalized Palestinian Authority to have governance and ultimately security responsibilities for Gaza. How stupid is he? I mean, is he as dumb as Biden? He might be exceeding him. Palestinian Authority pays Hamas victims that are terrorists. It pays their families. The Palestinian Authority, and Abbas is like 80-some years old. He's not going to be able to rule Gaza. Hamas has ruled it. Abbas is just a figurehead. So to say the Palestinian Authority would take over means absolutely nothing. That would be horrific. Even if Hamas is utterly destroyed, Hezbollah and Iran will still need to be dealt with. America needs to strike the head of the snake. We need to do it right now. But the Biden administration studiously avoids identifying Iran as the real enemy. For the terrible truth is that Iran has been empowered by America. What do I mean? Well, the Obama administration in 2015's nuclear deal would not only have enabled a nuclear weaponized Iran after only a few years' delay, it also funneled billions of dollars into Tehran's coffers, which it used to accelerate its regional power grab and terrorist activities. Obama started this. You want to put the blame on someone? Put it on Obama. He made Iran rich. They took that money and they made Hamas rich. They took that money, they made Hezbollah rich. They took that money and they made the Houthis of Yemen rich. And all of those proxies are now focused on wiping Israel out. America is to blame. Obama is to blame. Biden is to blame. As a result, far from having Israel's back, the Biden administration is aiming its knives at it. The IDF is going to great lengths to protect Gazan civilians as much as possible in the middle of a war. It's warning them to evacuate targeted buildings throughout leaflets, phone calls, and knock-on-the-roof missiles. They're just sending them to the roof, letting them know it's coming. It's set a humanitarian corridor to the south, and it's guarding it so the Palestinians can get out without Hamas killing them, along which it has been guarding evacuees against attacks from Hamas. Hamas is also targeting its own civilians that are trying to get out. So don't hit me with the propaganda war that Israel is cruel and Israel is doing something that's not humanitarian. Of course they are. Hamas are the demons. Hamas are the ones that are to blame. And by the way, they want a ceasefire? There was a ceasefire all the way up until October 6th. And October 7th, Hamas broke that ceasefire by invading the kibbutzim in Israel. Let me go a little bit further and give you a little bit on war as we're talking about it. Teachers Union sponsors pro-Hamas rally. America is coming apart at the seams. Teachers unions across the United States keep getting caught up in pro-Hamas activism. How could you be pro-Hamas? I don't even know. That's an oxymoron to be pro-Hamas. How could you be for Hamas? In the wake of the Hamas terrorist attacks on Israel in early October, several teachers unions and their affiliates have attracted scrutiny by expressing pro-Hamas sentiments. I can't even believe I'm reading that to you. Major teacher unions in the United States are affiliated with anti-Israeli organizations, while teacher unions or their employees have explicitly justified Hamas violence. The National Education Association, the NEA, and the American Federation of Teachers, the AFT, both formally endorsed the work of Black Lives Matter at school. That's one unit, Black Lives Matter at school. Previously posted an anti-Israeli pro-Palestinian resource kit for teachers in October following the Hamas terrorist attacks in Israel. It's a Marxist organization. Black Lives Matter at school is a Marxist organization. They want to undergird America. They want to break America up. BLM at school recommends over a dozen websites with resources for teachers to teach about Israel and Gaza with similar sentiments. One of the websites linked to BLM at school's Palestinian resource kit is called Decolonize Palestine, which says it's a myth that Israel is a democracy. It is not a myth. I've been to Israel over 50 times. It is a democracy. Another website says that teaches about the boycott, divestment, and sanctions against Israel, and advocates for divesting funds and divesting support for Israel. New York City-based United Federation of Teachers, UFT, co-sponsored a pro-Palestinian rally, also sponsored by the New York City Democratic Socialists. So think about who's involved in these things. Socialists, Marxists. These are people who are trying to tear down American democracy. They have justified Hamas's violence. The Oakland Education Association, OAE, faced backlash for several posts in October, including one that called Israel an apartheid state. The University of Kansas Teaching Assistants Union, GTAC AFT Local 6403, sympathized with violence against Israel in a statement on October 18th. Here's what they said. Violence will necessarily continue as long as apartheid and settler colonialism exist. Palestinians must be free if we ever hope to see peace, the union said in a statement. I think that union needs to listen to its history. The Palestinians are free. Israel does not occupy Palestine. Palestine has its own free elections. Israel pulled out in 2006. I've said it over and over and over. But obviously, people in America are not really smart, or else they're just listening to their media that's a woke, secular media. Go on a little bit further, because I'm really kind of get upset with this when I hear these things. Number of Palestinians killed in Israel attacks on Gaza since October 7th surpasses 10,000, including more than 4,000 children, or one child killed every 10 minutes, is an absolute bold-faced lie. That is a propaganda coming out of Hamas. They want you to think Israel's killing their civilians. They are not killing their civilians. They're not targeting them. They're going out of their way not to include them in any wars. Listen, legacy media reporters across the West are failing the public by refusing to disclose the bias that is coming out in reports regarding Hamas and their terrorism against Israel. And the Middle East democracy's response, according to a new report that's come out. Problem is that the media, without qualification, without explanation, is quoting, listen to it, Hamas's narrative on what is developing in Gaza. Where does this article come from? Or where does this 10,000 come? That's Hamas's narrative. That's not actual. That's from Hamas. According to an investigative project on terrorism, one problem was with CNN. You think, listen, this organization said as Israel's genocide in the Gaza Strip entered its 17th day today, the death toll climbed to over 5,000, according to the latest reports. But the source was the Palestinian Information Center, quote, Palestinian Information Center, PIC, which gets its messaging from Hamas. So Hamas is telling us this. And then from the BBC, which said more than 5,000 Palestinians in Gaza have been killed in air and artillery strikes carried out by the Israeli military in response, according to Gaza's health ministry. That is a bold-faced lie. The ethical code of the International Federation of Journalists, which represents 600,000 media professionals from 140 countries, specifically requires that urgency in the dissemination of information shall not take precedence over the verification of facts or sources. What they're saying is this: Do not report things just right off the bat. Make sure you vet the sources. And these that you're getting in the Western media, I'm getting from CNN and NBC and ABC and CBS, have not been vetted. They're just echoing and parroting what Hamas is saying without even, just like the hospital that was supposed to be bombed by Israel, that was vetted. It was not. It was a Hamas rocket that didn't even bomb the hospital. It went into a parking lot. But reporters in those legacy media organizations haven't been doing that, the report said. They instead often fail to remind readers or listeners of several crucial facts relevant to the reliability of information sourced from Hamas. Why? Well, there are no checks and balances on Hamas from any governmental or political institution. It's a de facto Islamist dictatorship with a tyrannical rule akin to that of the Taliban, the report said. Further, there is no freedom of speech or assembly under Hamas in Gaza. They could say anything they want. They're just like Hitler's Germany. This is Goebbels and his propaganda machine. They are full of propaganda. They want their civilians killed. They'll kill them themselves so that Israel can get blamed, so that they can have propaganda. Previously, Human Rights Watch concluded, quote, the PA and Hamas used detention to punish critics, deter them and others from further activism. In detention, security forces routinely taunt, threaten, beat, and force detainees into painful stress positions for hours at a time. So you may hear that someone from Gaza, a reporter, has reported that, you may hear it in the future, that so many have died. Well, that reporter and his family would be killed if he didn't report that. In fact, it said journalists' families have been threatened when there appear stories unfavorable to Hamas. But the downfall to the reporting is that Hamas's control of the Western press, our press, is particularly relevant when it comes to reporting anything contrary to Hamas's preferred narrative in any conflict with Israel. The red flags are waving because of the stark contrast to the information provided by Israeli government officials, hospitals, and other sources. One recent example was Hamas's swift claim of 500 dead from an explosion at a Gaza hospital, as I said. Turns out it was a Hamas rocket, and it hit a parking lot, not the hospital. But it was used by Hamas to turn global public opinion against Israel, the report said. And Al Jazeera, Associated Press, and Time bought into the lie full-fledged. So we're watching this happen. The propaganda war is gigantic. You know, one of the things that I wish would happen, in a sense, is when World War II was over and General Eisenhower went in to visit Auschwitz and saw the destruction that was there and the total brutalization and killing of Jews. One report says that he threw up. He went out and threw up. And then he said, get me all the German citizens from all over the cities near Auschwitz and every other concentration camp and bring them through here before this is cleaned up. And he brought them through so they could see it. We know that there's a 45-minute video that was taken by the IDF has compiled it from videos taken by the Hamas terrorists of their killing and the glee that they had. They show it to dignitaries, they show it to world leaders, and every world leader that sees it realizes what Hamas is like. We probably need to see that. I would not want to see it, but the world needs to see that. It's horrific, it's horrendous, it's satanic. Let's go on a little bit further. So what is the future of Gaza? Well, while Israel methodically seeks to rid Gaza of Hamas, the United States and other nations are discussing who will govern Gaza once Hamas is removed. So the brainiacs in the United States are saying, well, why don't we put the PA in there? Some others are saying, why don't we put the nations, the Islamic nations that are favorable to Israel, like Egypt and Jordan, to rule them. But we got to realize that that's not going to work. Then they're saying we want to put the UN in. That's probably the worst thing you could possibly do. Another possibility would be to persuade the Arab states who have signed peace deals or normalization pacts with Israel to provide an oversee a security force for Gaza. While the Bible is unclear on details, it clearly states, at the time of the end, a military, political, and religious power referred to as the King of the North will eventually move into the land of Israel and Jerusalem. That's in Daniel 11. And sometimes before the end, Jews will offer sacrifices once again in Jerusalem. Since sacrifices cannot be stopped, a scripture prophesies will happen unless they can't do it unless they first restart it. So we know that. So basically what we're saying is the current hostility between Hamas and Israel could be a catalyst that brings an international force into the whole end. Possibly a ruler like someone called the Antichrist. Someone who would take control, be able to control the Middle East. Trust me, Antichrist is going to make a peace treaty with Israel. It's not just going to be with Israel. It's going to be to control that area. Right now, it is a powder keg. And right now, it's blowing up. Someone's going to need to come and take control. It's a setup, a perfect setup for an Antichrist ruler. Will he be called Antichrist? No. He'll be called the savior of the area. All right, let's go on a little bit further. This is hysterical to me, and I don't mean to be funny, but it's hysterical. Queers for Palestine? Let me tell you something. Look at that chart. If you were a queer, or if you're a member of the LGBTQ community, and you went to Palestine and told them you were, you get your head lopped off. In less than a second, you get it lopped off because they don't tolerate it. They're totally against it. So Queers for Palestine is an oxymoron. There's no such thing. You can't be that and think that that the Hamas is going to support you. The road to another Holocaust is being paved with wokeness and apathy. The Holocaust took place only 80 years ago, or already 80 years ago. When we look at man's lifespan, it helps to understand that almost all who have gone through those horrors of the Shoah, that's Hebrew for catastrophe, and survived it, are now gone simply because of old age. Very soon, no one will be able to hold someone's hand and turn their arm to discover the infamous tattoo of doom, the death number of the camps. The voices of Shoah are fading away, while the voices of historical revisionism are shouting that the Holocaust was either grossly exaggerated or never happened. Its memory is in the hands of family members of Holocaust victims only. The Holocaust increasingly runs the risk of being regulated in some obscure corner of history. Even worse, some will soon believe that it simply never happened. They're doing it already. So let's fast forward. Hamas's terrorist attack on Israel on October 7th, we now know that their attack was straight out of the Nazi playbook. Actually, it was more like a merging of Nazis and ISIS on steroids. Most people have been unable to watch any of the gruesome footage gathered by the IDF, as I've told you. This is 1933 all over again. We've turned an important corner in modern anti-Semitism. The beast has been globally unleashed. I'll talk about that tonight in spiritual warfare, and is on a brutal rampage for Jewish lives. If this is the new normal for Jewish people worldwide, then we must adjust to it as well. And as believers, we must not be silent. Every time there was a world war, World War I, World War II, there was massive anti-Semitism right before it. Thousands of Hamas sympathizers have gathered all over the globe to rally against Israel in the biggest display of double standard that we have ever witnessed. The Jewish people need to know that there are Christians who are ready to commit to their rescue and to their safety. Where is the church when pro-Hamas people are chanting from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, or gas the Jews? The world is being split in two as we see pro-Israel and pro-Palestinian factions take sides. Let me talk to pastors tonight. If you don't tell your people publicly that we need to support Israel, you are going to be silent on something that you should never be silent of. We should be backing Israel right now from every pulpit in America. To be sure, not all Palestinians side with Hamas. We know that. Many of them just want to live in peace, but the lines are being blurred by biased reporting and double standards. Add to that the fact that the younger generations easily buy the lies about Israel because they have no clue about history. They're clueless. They're gullible victims of the propaganda spewers. Consider this. 63% of millennials and Generation Z don't know that 6 million Jews died in the Holocaust. 48% of millennials and Generation Z can't name one single concentration camp. 56% of millennials and Generation Z are unable to identify Auschwitz, what it means, what that word means. 11% of millennials and Generation Z believe that the Jews caused the Holocaust. 49% of millennials and Generation Z have seen Holocaust denial on social networks. Israel needs you. The Jewish people need you. And now is not the time to sit on the fence. The road to Auschwitz was built by hate, but it was paved with indifference. The road to another Holocaust is being rebuilt by hate, but now paved with wokeness and apathy. Good things for in the news tonight. Good articles. They're tough, but they're good articles. Let me give you this on pure prophecy. Is worldwide Jew hatred setting the stage for the tribulation period? I'm getting questions for this every week. People tend to see things two-dimensionally, usually to the left or to the right. Sometimes that is agitated by nefarious forces who have a deeper agenda, and sometimes it occurs organically, aided by a spiritual enemy who hates mankind, who hates the Jews, who hates Christians, and who hates God. The latest trigger point for demonically inspired violence against Jews is the war that Israel is conducting against Hamas and Hezbollah right now. Most rational people, even unbelievers, would have a sense that sympathizing with Hamas right now is akin to endorsing the kidnapping, the torture, the rape, the beheading, and the murder of Jews. You cannot go along with this. You cannot sympathize with this. I don't care what your aims are, whether you're going against the politics of Israel or not, you cannot sympathize with this. Whatever content we filter into our worldview will determine how we act, how we speak, and how we'll think. Therefore, it is probably of little surprise that the most vulgar displays of anti-Semitism has been found on college and university campuses, because many colleges and universities of this era are indoctrinating their students with politically progressive and unbiblical ideas. Students are taught what to think rather than how to think. The professors dominate and intimidate students. If you go up against them, your grade often suffers. There's a tyranny in higher education that is gravely harming this nation. Another reason that colleges and universities seem to be hotbeds for hatred is that many are taught that the only paradigm in which to view the world is oppressor and oppressed class. Ostensibly, the education system, including lower grade schools, has sought to address cultural and racial prejudice, but has in fact inflamed the culture and the race wars. When you talk about who's been oppressed and who is oppressing, that is not what we're supposed to teach our kids. And that's all we've been teaching our kids. For example, James Logan High School in California offers a course that aims to teach students to challenge and criticize power, oppression, capitalism, white supremacy, imperialism, and colonialism. The changes aren't about education. They're about incitement to take action to disrupt and dismantle America's fundamental social and political institutions. Minnesota's new K-12 studies require students to organize with others to reset systemic and coordinated exercise of power against marginalized, oppressive groups. Education institutions are no longer focused on raising socially adjusted, educated people. They're focused on instilling a seed within people that leads to hostility against any who would belong to the oppressor class. You know what's ironic to me, what's really kind of sad to me, is that all these Americans that are going against it, you are living on Indian land. Columbus didn't discover America. America was already discovered by the Indians. So even you living on land, this is the fact of war. This is the fact of people conquering other people. They claim their lands. I'm not saying it was good. It was not good. Indians were pushed off this land. But for you to come now and say that you're oppressed, I mean, you've been given a land that wasn't even yours. So how could you say you're oppressed? To give examples, kindergartners must retell a story about an unfair experience that conveys a power imbalance. I don't even know. When I was in kindergarten, we learned how to color. I don't really get it. They're to identify examples of ethnicity, equality, liberation, and systems of power, and use those examples to construct meanings for those terms. That's ridiculous. Again, when I was in first grade, we were coloring. Anti-Semitism is an early indication of a troubled culture, and if the terrorist attack by Hamas teaches us anything, is that Western nations are in deeper trouble than we ever thought. Many claim that the virtue of free speech is gone. Free speech of the kind we are hearing throughout our nation is not the hallmark of a free and vibrant culture. It's the hallmark of a culture which is in great spiritual peril. Anti-Semitism is like the canary in the coal mine of democracy. It's a threat, a warning. If you're an anti-Semite, then you think, well, the justice system isn't fair because it's controlled by Jews. The government isn't fair because it's controlled by Jews. The media isn't fair because it's controlled by Jews. You know where that comes right from? It comes right from the pogroms of Nazi Hitler in 1933. I can think of no democracy that tolerated anti-Semitism and remained a vibrant democracy. But the peril is even greater than that. Embracing Jew hatred is not only an indicator of cultural decline, but also God's impending judgment. And let me remind you, the evidence of this is found not only in the Bible, but also in history books. Egypt, Philistia, Assyria, Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, the Byzantines, Crusaders, the Spanish Empire, Nazi Germany, and the Soviet Union. They all touched the apple of God's eye, and they felt God's hand of judgment. So will Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis, and Iran. Global economy. Most Americans have no idea we have spent $4.1 billion promoting not Ukraine, not Taiwan, not Israel, LGBT causes. 4.1 billion of your tax dollars. Despite an ongoing war in the Middle East, open borders flooding in millions of illegal immigrants, a worsening drug crisis, and increased risk of terrorist attacks in the United States, President Joe Biden apparently has other priorities. According to Epoch Times investigation of government spending, in the last 3 fiscal years, $4.1 billion in federal money from taxpayers has been put towards LGBT initiatives both within the United States and across the globe. Sadly, the Biden administration has systematically infected nearly all parts of our foreign policy apparatus to push LGBT ideology across the globe. Under Biden, Pride Month is celebrated at embassies. LGBT issues are included in the State Department's annual human rights reports. The government observes LGBT commemoration days, and the State Department and U.S. Agency for International Development fund LGBT activism abroad. This type of international activism is alienating to many American allies in the developing world that have more conservative or traditional value systems. I'll tell you right now, every Arab Islamic nation has laws against being LGBT. We are not helping ourselves. Listen, as for the $4.1 billion directed to LGBT priorities in foreign policy, most American citizens have no idea that's how much money went. The U.S. government has wasted so much money on not only useless but deeply harmful programs in the United States and around the world. Biden administration still insists on using taxpayer dollars, yours and mine, to aid radical agenda is deeply disrespectful to a large portion of Americans. So basically what we're seeing is we are seeing the Biden administration give your money away to woke organizations to promote LGBTQ, 2% to 4% of American population. Probably less in the world population. Why? I have to feel that Biden needs to be impeached because he's threatening our national security. I think he's single-handedly pulling down America, making it a third world country. He needs to be impeached. He needed to be impeached last year. Let's go a little bit further and tell you a little bit more. Biden giving your tax money to U.S. mosques that seek total annihilation of Jews. When you don't think it can get worse, it gets worse. This is the news you're not getting. You're not getting this anywhere. I vet all of these articles. These articles are absolutely true. This is what's happening in your country. A federal program intended to help religious organizations, quote unquote, defend against terror attacks has been used by the Biden administration to give hundreds of thousands of dollars in tax dollars to organizations that openly seek the annihilation of the Jews. The Washington Free Beacon revealed that Biden gave to the First Islamic Center $300,000 under the program. Even as an Islamic scholar there said this about Jews, said literally live for the purpose of genocide of the Palestinians. But we're giving them money. The Free Beacon confirmed that millions of dollars have been gone under the program to mosques and Islamic groups that have praised terrorists and called for the destruction of Israel. The money flows through the Department of Homeland Security under the Nonprofit Security Grants Program. Anti-Semitic hate crimes have surged 400% since the Hamas attack, but $150,000 did go to a Hamas center in San Diego, best known as the home of two of the 9/11 hijackers. The Council of American Islamic Relations, a pro-Muslim action group named as a co-conspirator of Hamas, has even mounted a public awareness campaign to urge mosques and Islamic nonprofits to apply for Homeland Security grants. Also, the Islamic Organization of North America got $450,000, even though its head imam claimed Palestinians were being slaughtered by the Israeli Zionist government. At a special event held by an activist who also claimed, quote, "We stand with Hamas and Hezbollah against the occupation, and we're giving money." Again, your taxpayer money. Man, if this doesn't get you fighting mad, I don't know what does. The only way you can do anything about this is to go to the polls and pray that our elections aren't rigged. You got to go to the polls and you have to get rid of this administration. It's horrible. It's horrific. It's hurting America bad every day. And right now he's talking with Xi Jinping. Who knows what he's saying to him? Xi Jinping has him over a barrel. Maybe he's begging him not to send another balloon over. I don't know. But he's definitely not talking about the human rights violations that Beijing is doing. He's definitely not talking about climate change because they're the worst polluters on the planet. And he's definitely not talking about the pandemic that they started. And so it's just it's a joke that you clean up San Francisco, just get the homeless out just so Xi Jinping can look at a clean city. They're going to be right back there the next day. It's ridiculous, unbelievable what's happening in America. Let me go a little bit further. The U.S. economy is one bank run away from disaster. Our economy runs on credit, and our banks are the beating heart of that system. Without healthy banks, how would Americans buy homes or purchase vehicles or get credit cards? The way that our system is currently constructed, it's absolutely imperative for our banks to function properly. Unfortunately, the truth is that our banks have gotten into deep financial trouble. They're sitting on hundreds of billions of dollars in unrealized losses. And the primary reason why those losses have become so large is because we've witnessed a historic bond market crash over the past several years. Treasury bonds, debt instruments the government issues to fund its spending. They make treasury bonds. It helps to fund your spending. They've been a nightmarish run since the onset of the pandemic, with investors fretting about rising interest rates and the long-term viability of the U.S.'s massive deficit. Thanks to the historic bond market crash, our financial institutions were sitting on $650 billion in unrealized losses as of September. After what we witnessed during the month of October, what's the real number now? Has it surpassed $700 billion? Maybe $800 billion? Nobody really knows. However, what we do know is that we've never seen anything like this before. How many times have you heard those words? But if there is a run on banks, the banks that are affected will need to start selling off their bonds at a huge loss. And that would be a nightmare for America. While they are generally purchased and intended to be held until they mature, if banks experience a surge of withdrawals, or run on the bank, if you will, they may need to sell them. That's what happened to Silicon Valley Bank earlier this year. It was forced to sell those bonds as its depositors sought to withdraw funds, and it went out of business. The other big four banks, Citigroup, JP Morgan Chase, and Wells Fargo, have also racked up unrealized losses in the tens of billions, according to their second and third quarter earnings reports. Just a few days ago, we witnessed the sixth bank failure this year. The combined assets of those six banks actually exceeds the combined assets of the 25 banks that failed in 2008. More bank failures are coming. Once the dominoes start falling, they'll keep falling until some government intervention of particularly draconian kind is imposed. Meanwhile, all over our economy, it continues to steadily deteriorate. U.S. government debt will rise $20 trillion in the next 10 years, or $5.2 billion every day, or $218 million every single hour. Estimated annualized interest payments to the United States government debt climbed past $1 trillion at the end of last month. That's just the interest on the debt. Credit card debt climbed to a record high for the third quarter in 2023, leaving a growing share of borrowers late on payments. The number of retail layoffs have jumped 258% compared to the same time period last year. A new survey published by Banknote on Wednesday shows that 50% of Americans say that financial situation has gotten worse since Biden has been elected president. Among Americans who are feeling pessimistic about the financial outlook, 50% blame Biden and his economic policies, Bidenomics. But as bad as things are right now, the truth is that what we are experiencing at this moment will be considered rip-roaring prosperity compared to what's coming. We're on the brink of an economic shaking that will be unlike anything that our nation has ever seen before. Excuse me. America is literally drowning in debt. The value of our currency is being destroyed, and now our financial system stands on the brink of unprecedented crisis. So I hope you're prepared for what's coming next. So people ask me all the time, Pastor, what do we do? Well, let me tell you. They write to me. They ask me all the time. Number one, get out of debt as fast as you possibly could. Number two, be careful how much money you keep in a bank. Be careful. Buy assets right now. Gold, silver, real estate investments. Because your dollar is eroding every single day and has a whole lot less buying power than it's had even a year ago. All right, lastly, how many are ready for good news? I see all those hands raising up all over the planet. All right, I know there's some raising right in here. Some good news. This woman is a well-known atheist. She became a Christian. Her name is Ayaan Hirsi Ali. She says she's now found the purpose for life. She shocked the atheist community because she's very high up in it that she belongs to. Ayaan, a research fellow for the Stanford University Hoover Institution, previously was considered a member of the New Atheist movement alongside others such as Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, and Christopher Hitchens. But in a new column at Unheard, she said she has become a Christian. Her column is titled, Why I Am Now a Christian. It's a great title, let me tell you why. It's a reference to a 1927 lecture by an atheistic philosopher, Bertrand Russell, titled, Why I Am Not a Christian. Now she has Why I Am Now a Christian. Hirsi Ali attributes her conversion to global reasons. She believes atheism doesn't have answers for a clash of civilizations, but also to spiritual reasons. Quote, I have also turned to Christianity because I ultimately found life without any spiritual solace, unendurable, indeed very nearly self-destructive. Atheism failed to answer a simple question I had: what is the meaning and the purpose of life? She writes, but the God hole, the void left by the retreat of the church, has merely been filled by a jumble of irrational, quasi-religious dogma. She writes, the result is a world where modern cults prey on the dislocated masses, offering them spurious reasons for being and for action, mostly by engaging in virtue signaling theater on behalf of a victimized minority. I just told you about that. Or our supposedly doomed planet. Climate change. When men choose not to believe in God, they do not therefore believe in nothing. They then become capable of believing in anything. She adds, I discover a little more at church every Sunday I attend, but I've recognized in my own long journey through a wilderness of fear and self-doubt that there's a better way to manage the challenges of existence that either Islam or unbelief had to offer. Hershey Ali's 2006 Infidel recounted her early years in Somalia and her eventual rejection of Islam. Hitchens penned the foreword. She spoke at the 2012 Global Atheist Convention. This is a big one that fell. Atheism, she writes in her new column, is too weak and divisive a doctrine to fortify against our menacing foes. Christianity, she writes, is the root of all freedoms. What is it that unites us? There is, she writes, no need to look for some New Age connection or concoction of meditation and mindfulness. It's found in Jesus Christ and God. I love that. That is absolutely amazing. She is a big one that fell, and thank God she did. All right.